going on, guys? You're watching the Shield Bearer of Faith. So there's a lot of conversation about defunding the police right now. And since that, could directly affect me, maybe not in my area right now, but if that were to be something people actually tried, it would definitely affect me. Just like the actions of a few police officers seem to be affecting me, among every other police officer. Let's talk about it. What are my thoughts on that? Well, to start with, you could argue that there has not always been police. And you would be partially right. There has not always been a literal police force as we know it today. It has not always been as militarized as people think it is today. There's some accuracies there. So, giving credit where credit's due, yep, we've got some military-style equipment. Now, people look at the armored vehicles, people look at body armor, people might look at helmets. Continue the list, right? We have some paramilitary equipment. But if that's the direction we're going down, and people are up in arms that we have some of that equipment, so do you as the average Joe. So I'm going to start there with my first point. If you want to demilitarize the police, that goes hand in hand with demilitarizing the public, because I'm just another guy. I had what a lot of people in the media describe as military equipment, such as body armor and rifles. I had that stuff before I was a cop. And that wouldn't change just because I stopped being one. So there's my first point. If you're wanting to demilitarize and disband the police, well, then you might as well go ahead and do that to the whole country. And I look for that to be the breaking point for a lot of good law-abiding citizens, where they would say, nope, that's not happening. I don't blame them. I'm not going to just be disarmed. So you can't do that without disarming the entire public. So that's not really something that I can be on board with, because I believe in the Second Amendment. I believe in your right to have body armor to protect your life. Things like that. Historically speaking, if there has not been a literal police force, then you had the military doing the same duties. So think about, feudal Europe, right? Or ancient Rome, something like that. You would have like a town watch kind of idea, which would be your equivalent today to police. You would have people with weaponry, with shields, with armor, that were tasked with being on call or ready, watching the town gates, standing on the wall, patrolling, various things. Because there's never been a time where you didn't have to make sure that order was maintained. So there is no real alternative to police other than military. So I think if you're someone who is trying to say we should disband or defund or abolish the police force, I think you need to also be trying to include what your other suggestion would be. Let's say that it is something that needs to be abolished. Let's just go there. What's your alternative? I would love to hear it, because I read an article just a couple days ago talking about how there's going to be they described it as like a militant wing or a police-oriented wing of the Black Lives Matter movement. Okay, I'm not inherently against that, but the way it was described is that it would be a militia. Okay, same exact explanation I just gave. You either have what we currently do have, which is a non-military but paramilitary force known as police, or you have a military force like a militia or a legitimate government-controlled military. So I think you need to ask yourselves, which would you rather have? Another thought is, if you're wanting to disband, defund, abolish the police, why not just try that? So let's go and talk to the city council members of, I think it's Minneapolis, where they're actually discussing this. You know what? I'm all about trying a gun before you buy it. I'm all about test driving a car before you buy it. I'm all about looking in a house before you buy it, so you get an idea of what you're getting into. You could test run this. If you don't want the police, let every one of them take a week off. All of them at the same time. Let every single officer in any of these cities that are currently having riots take the same week off. You can test run what it would be like to not have police. And once you try that, then you let me know if that's something you like to continue. Because if there is not a police force or some equivalent, like we've already mentioned, to respond to whatever the emergency is, then you have absolute anarchy. If there is no blue line to respond to when you have an active shooter, when you have looting, when you have fires that have been caused by militant organizations, when you have terrorist threats, when you have bombings, when you have car crashes, when you have, name your thing, when you have rapes, when you have domestic violence, if you do not have a police force to respond to that, then who stops it? Or who apprehends the suspect? Who tries to establish order? Even if you don't think they do a good job, who's the alternative? So if you're someone who wants to abolish, defund, or disband the police, please feel free to comment as to what your realistic alternative is. Because there's a lot of people throwing around things like, well, we need to just abolish it, and that's where it stops for them. I want to know what your recommendation, detailed plan. So don't just say, well, just replace it. That's not a plan. I'm talking about steps, exact detailed steps on how you would recommend abolishing it. And like I said, you can try this. Let all of them take a day off, or 3 days off, or a week off. I think it'll be worse than you think. Of course I'm biased though, because I'm working in this field. But I'd like to think, if you've watched any of my other videos, that I try to have a neutral level head on some things. I did not agree with the lockdowns just because I'm a police officer. I can think for myself. Just like I do not agree with what I saw in the video of how police responded in reference to George Floyd. Just like I do not have to agree with everything that any other group is doing. I can think for myself. Give it some thought, guys. If these places want to actually disband police, that will be absolutely catastrophic. I hope it helps, and I'll see you later.